Neanderthals, those mysterious ancient humans who once roamed the earth alongside our early ancestors. They were a remarkable group, and trust me, their story is anything but boring. Let's break it down and explore who they were, how they lived, and why they disappeared. Neanderthals were an extinct species of humans that thrived in Western Eurasia during the Ice Age. They showed up roughly in the middle of the Pleistocene era and stuck around until about 40,000 years ago. What's wild is that for a short time, they shared Europe with the first modern humans, yes, us, Homo sapiens, who arrived around 45,000 years ago. Talk about ancient neighbors. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Neanderthals were absolute survivalists. They adapted to harsh, unpredictable climates with advancing and retreating ice sheets. Their bodies were built for the job, short, stocky, and powerful, which helped them stay warm and hunt massive Ice Age creatures like mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses. And don't underestimate them. They had brains even larger than ours, helping them develop the skills needed to tackle those giant beasts. Believe it or not, Neanderthals and modern humans are connected in more ways than you might think. We share a common ancestor from Africa, dating back about 550,000 to 750,000 years ago. When modern humans and Neanderthals crossed paths in Europe, they not only competed for resources but also got a little too friendly, if you know what I mean. The result? Some of their genes are still present in us today. So yeah, you might have a little Neanderthal DNA in you, but wait, it gets better. Neanderthals weren't just connected to us, they had a closer sibling species called the Denisovan. These two groups branched off from the same ancestor more than 390,000 years ago. And here's the kicker. Scientists discovered a bone fragment in Siberia's Denisova cave in 2012 that belonged to a young woman with a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. Mind-blowing, right? It's like finding out about ancient family drama. The story of Neanderthals begins to unfold in the early 19th century when their fossils were first discovered. At first, people didn't even realize they were looking at ancient humans. Instead, they chalked it up to diseases like rickets. But in 1856, when more remains were unearthed in Germany's Neander Valley, researchers began piecing the puzzle together, especially after Darwin's On the Origin of Species came out in 1859. By 1864, Neanderthals officially got their name, Homo Neanderthalensis. As for when Neanderthals first appeared, it's tricky to pinpoint. Early Neanderthal-like traits began emerging between 600,000 and 400,000 years ago, but the classic Neanderthal look didn't fully develop until around 70,000 years ago. Their evolution was shaped by Ice Age Europe, where they spread across regions like Spain, Russia, the Near East, and even Siberia. Physically, Neanderthals were built for survival in a cold, harsh world. The men averaged about 169 centimeters tall, while the women were around 160 centimeters. They had broad chests, heavy brow ridges, and large noses, which likely helped warm the frigid air they breathed. Interestingly, they had larger brains than us, though their faces were less protruding than earlier human ancestors. When it comes to appearance, they likely had a wide range of skin tones and hair colors, from pale skin and red hair to darker tones. Life wasn't easy for Neanderthals. Most adult skeletons show signs of injuries, likely from hunting close-up with massive prey. Yet, these injuries often healed, suggesting they cared for one another when someone got hurt. That's pretty heartwarming, right? Still, life was tough, and their average lifespan was sadly quite short. And now let's talk about the everyday lives of Neanderthals. They weren't just tough hunters. Their lifestyle tells us so much about how they survived and thrived in a challenging Ice Age world. Neanderthals were incredibly active and relied heavily on hunting for their food. The kinds of animals they went after were no joke. Bison, wild cattle, reindeer, deer, ibex, and wild boars made up a big part of their diet. But here's the impressive part. They also hunted massive Ice Age giants like woolly mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses. Just imagine the coordination and skill it would take to bring one of those beasts down. These were serious group efforts, showcasing their teamwork and intelligence. But it wasn't all about meat. Neanderthals had a varied diet that included plants like legumes, grasses, seeds, and fruits. They even cooked their food, which probably made it easier to digest and provided more energy. Some evidence suggests they might have understood the medicinal properties of certain plants too. Pretty advanced for their time, right? Now, when it comes to tools, Neanderthals were resourceful. They're most often linked with a type of tool-making technology called Mousterian. Think flint flakes turned into scrapers, points, and small hand axes, perfect for hunting and daily tasks. While they didn't leave behind many bone tools, they probably used wooden ones as well. And fire? Oh, they mastered that. By at least 200,000 years ago, they were producing birch bark pitch using fire. Evidence shows controlled use of fire was common in Europe as far back as 400,000 years ago. Their fires lit up caves and provided warmth, cooked food, and helped in tool making. Interestingly, their living spaces weren't exactly tidy. The areas they used in caves were small and a bit chaotic, but hearths, central fire pits, were clearly important. These spots were likely gathering places for warmth, cooking, and maybe even storytelling. For a long time, Neanderthals were dismissed as primitive and less intelligent than early modern humans, but that's no longer the case. They weren't just skilled hunters. They cared for their injured, made advanced tools, and even engaged in symbolic behavior. They buried their dead intentionally, built complex structures like the stalagmite rings found in Brunico Cave, and used materials like red ochre for what might have been artistic or symbolic purposes. In fact, they were doing some of these things as far back as 200,000 to 250,000 years ago, putting them on par with early modern humans in Africa. But now we have to address the big question: what happened to them? Around 55,000 years ago, modern humans leaving Africa encountered Neanderthals in the Near and Middle East. There was some interbreeding even earlier, possibly around 100,000 years ago, but this later wave left the biggest genetic mark on us. As modern humans spread into Europe around 45,000 years ago, they came in larger groups than the Neanderthals, creating intense competition for resources. By about 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals disappeared from the fossil record. It wasn't just competition that did them in, though. The climate around that time was incredibly unstable, which would have been a huge challenge for a population already smaller and more vulnerable than the incoming humans. Interestingly, interbreeding with Neanderthals may have helped modern humans adapt to the colder European climate. Some of their genes, affecting things like skin and hair, live on in us today. In fact, most non-African humans carry about 2% Neanderthal DNA. However, interbreeding wasn't entirely smooth. Research suggests it caused fertility issues, especially for male babies with Neanderthal Y chromosomes, which could have limited their genetic contribution over time. Combine that with their smaller population and other pressures, and it seems likely that interbreeding played a role in their disappearance, almost as if they were partially absorbed into the growing human population. In the end, the Neanderthals' extinction was probably due to a mix of factors: competition, climate changes, and interbreeding. But their legacy is still with us, both in our genes and in what they've taught us about survival, resilience, and ingenuity. Their story isn't over yet. We're still uncovering new pieces of the puzzle.